UN report on human rights in Xinjiang is damning for China, but what will its impact be? UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Michelle Bachelet gives the final press conference at the UN offices in Geneva on August 25, 2022. Hong Kong CNN. For Adila Yarmuhammad, the release of a damning new report from the United Nations top human rights officer on the treatment of Uyghur and other Muslim minorities in Xinjiang brought relief and sadness. The Australian born 22-year-old, whose family comes from the region in the northwest of China, woke up Thursday to a fury of WhatsApp messages about the report from other young Uyghurs worldwide. Everyone is relieved that something like a report came out, but the sense of relief doesn't come with complete relief, said Yar Muhammad, a leader in the Australian Uyghur youth group. I feel even more upset because we knew. Deep down, we always knew that these things are happening. These things are very real to us. A lot of our community members had their first hand experiences. A lot of our family members have first hand experiences. For years, members of Uyghur diaspora and rights groups have pushed for a strong response within the UN system to repeated allegations of major human rights abuses in Xinjiang, but member countries have not voted to establish a proof into the claims, which China has regularly pushed back against within firm deniers. The report from UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights was based on the years-long assessment of those allegations and made a strong statement. China has committed serious human rights violations against Uyghur and other predominantly Muslim groups, which may amount to crimes against humanity. It's a long-awaited recognition of the Uyghurs' unimaginable suffering from the most authoritative voice on human rights in the world, said human rights lawyer Reyhan Assad, whose brother jailed Uyghur entrepreneur Akbar Assad has been held in Xinjiang since 2016. No government is above scrutiny and immune from accountability, despite China's effort to destroy or defund it. This report from the UN body is the honest indictment of China's crimes against humanity, said Assad, who lives in the United States. China has repeatedly denied the accusations of human rights abuses in the region, and on Wednesday decried the UN report as based on the disinformation and the lies fabricated by anti China forces. There are also stark questions about what impact the report will have on the ground within China and on Beijing, where Chinese leader Xi Jinping, under whom policies in Xinjiang were rolled out and who has strove to cement China's role on the global stage, is expected to break the tradition and step into a third term next month. On certain steps, many Uyghurs and human rights groups have rallied around the report, calling for it to be a wake up call to galvanizing support for action within the UN, where the General Assembly and the Human Rights Council both come into session in less than 2 weeks. Government should waste no time establishing an independent investigation and taking all measures necessary to advance accountability and provide Uyghurs and others the justice they are entitled. John Fisher, global advocacy deputy director at Human Rights Watch, said in a statement Thursday. Washington also called for follow up with U.S. Ambassador to the UN Linda Thomas Greenfield, saying it would be critical that the full Human Rights Council membership have an opportunity to formally discuss the findings of this report as soon as possible, and that the perpetrators of these atrocities are held accountable. A scrutiny guard watches from the tower around the detention facility in Yarkent County in northwestern China's Xinjiang region on March 21st, 2021. Before each publication, advocates that had said they hoped a strong report could encourage more countries like those in the Human Rights Council to come forward in support of accountability for China and spark a push for action from within other UN agencies. But actions taken within the UN depend on the will of member states, such as those in the Human Rights Council, which must vote to establish mechanisms like former human rights proofs, and China holds a significant sway. The report itself is not on the current agenda for the Human Rights Council's upcoming session, according to its website. It's also not slated on the UN Security Council agenda and would probably not be discussed in the September. Its president for the month, Nicolas de Libiere of France, said Thursday. Even if even if states in the Human Rights Council are ultimately to vote for formal investigation on the heels of the report, it has no power to compel China to allow UN investigators to enter its borders, complying with other recommendations in the report, such as release of arbitrarily detained people and the clarification of the whereabouts of missing individuals, would be at Beijing's discretion, and China has already made its stance at that clear. The suggestions the report made are completely based on the first information made up out of political purpose. Thus, China rightfully rejected. Chinese Minister of Foreign Affairs spokesperson Wang Wenbin said at the regular press briefing Thursday when asked whether China would take action on recommendations made. Impact in China. It's clear that China is concerned about the implications of the report. Its diplomats have repeatedly voiced their opposition to its release and have already issued multiple statements condemning it, including a 131-page rebuttal to the High Commissioner. The so-called assessment is an illegal document and perverse product of the U.S. and some other Western forces, coercive diplomacy. A spokesperson of the permanent mission of China to the UN said Thursday. But it remains to be seen if the report or ensuing international pressure will have the impact on the ground in Xinjiang, where academics and advocates are legion. The opposition goes on, though it's now being absorbed into the prison system and transformed into a forced labor apparatus and a culture of surveillance. The UN report also pointed to the indications of coercive labor, a shift towards the former incarcerations and invasive surveillance in Xinjiang, and said it could not verify Chinese claims that its system of so-called vocational education and training centers they were closed. Within China's heavily censored domestic media environment, where there has largely been silence, with the state media not covering the report released for domestic audiences. Chinese leader Xi Jinping gave a virtual address to the 76th session of the UN General Assembly on September 2021 in New York. The report, at the minimum, is embarrassing for China on the international stage, especially right before the Party Congress, according to Yun Sun, director of the China program at the Washington based think tank Stimson Center, referring to the upcoming political event where Xi is expected to assume his third term. China could deny the legality of all reports for Western countries and the media on Xinjiang as biased. But now it's the UN, with all its credibility and legitimacy, saying the same thing. Beijing is backed to the corner on this, and there is very little it could say to refute. She said. The report creates a negative blow to China's international image and could cast a shadow over Xi's speech if he addresses the UN General Assembly this month, Sun said. But it will not necessarily affect the Beijing position of countries that have already chosen not to oppose China on this issue in the UN, and its concrete impact on the ground remains to be seen, she added. For the communities of those directly affected who are thinking about loved ones in the region, those questions are stark and immediate. And at the end of the day, we are still relieved and we are satisfied that the report like this has come to the light, and it does shine a light on China and it helps us in our fight for human rights, said Yarmuhammad in Australia. But there are always the sinking feeling that it's not going to help. CNN, Hillary Whiteman, Nectar Gunn, and Jennifer Hensler contributed to this report.